Hey,
All
good
right.
morning. Good morning.
Hey,
Good morning, Rob. I'm not Brendan Martin. I'm his dad, and you are Rob Browne. And sure show and go.
hey, we're ready to roll. All kind of crazy stuff happening with satellites and everything, but we're making it work. Rob Browne here, Buddy Martin in Panama City. Uh, got the college football roundtable. Going to join today by Doug Dean and Dave Tompkins. They'll be on with us in just a minute. About half past the hour, Yancey Porter will check in, and hoping to have Eddie Murphy and Sandy Morris on again the last part of the show from the Ed Murphy Track and Field Classic, which is going on in Memphis the 11th, 12th, and 13th of July. And there are, I think Eddie said yesterday, 62 Olympians here in Memphis for the event. And they're going to have, golly, the field events were yesterday. The track and field today, there's a lot of SEC representation here at the event. So we'll get into all of that. But I'll tell you what, we're heading to Media Days Sunday. It starts Monday through Thursday out in Dallas, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I think there's a lot of anxiety from people going, what's it going to be like? Is the room going to be packed full of Texas media trying to push Texas to be picked preseason to win the conference? How strong is that Oklahoma contingent going to be? And Buddy, you've been to a lot of these media days over the years. They're coming from the Big 12 to the SEC, and it's a crowded room, Buddy. I mean, there's a lot of, 14-point, 300-pound bucks in that room, prize deer, per se. This is not the first time for Texas, or actually for Georgia and Alabama and Florida, LSU, Auburn, all these schools, Tennessee, they've won a lot. This is going to be a crazy atmosphere out there. I think that's what I predict, Buddy.
No doubt about it. And we'll have a lot to talk about. Your first guest is about ready to go, Mr. Tompkins. But I wanted to see if I can find this particular photo. I got this exclusive photo for what it may look like out there in Dallas when you guys get there. And I wish I was going to be joining you. I won't be there this year. But let's just see what, wait a minute, this is just coming in now. And this is what I'm told it will look like. Hold on, it's a little sketchy. Internet's slow, but we'll have it just so. Wait a minute, look here. Oh, this is interesting. All right, so I don't know. Do you play Texas Hold'em?
Do I? I don't play cards.
Wow.
I'm afraid I might like them.
Yeah,
But,
yeah, there you go.
Buddy, let me say this. This is pretty cool from one of our viewers, Buck Wade. 40 Olympians from the state of Florida. That's the most in America.
Well, people started counting. I noticed last night you talked to my show about the fact that they're counting coaches. So Florida, I guess Florida counted there 34 last time I looked. So let's count their coaches. They got a lot of coaches out there. It's pretty cool. Look at this right here and tell me. Shall we go bring in our first guest while we do this? Dave Tompkins is standing by.
Oh, yeah. Bring him in. He should be in his new studio down there in the Low Country in
okay.
South Carolina. Dave, come on in.
I'm going to get a Low Country boil going here.
Well, I got to I'm an earphones today. Does it sound better than normal? I'm hearing y'all much better with my earphones. That's
good. Good. Here's the bulletin for you, Rob, real quick. This just came in. This is what they say it looks like. SEC days. I don't know which one you are or which one Brendan is, but
Oh yeah,
characters right there. I'm telling you.
I like that.
The campfire from Blazing Saddles.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
Dave, Dave, your mic is whatever mic you're on. I can barely hear you on that thing. It's kind of muffled.
You need to back off of it. Some if you can't turn your volume down.
Yeah. Try to. Yeah. How's that sound, Dave?
Go ahead, Dave.
How is this better?
It's still a little muffled, but we'll get through it. We'll get through.
Nope.
Still. Okay. Okay. So, Dave, you saw that, and I think Brendan probably sent that in the Texas Hold'em, but there are a lot of storylines to go with. Alabama lately, as people are starting to dig in more and more, their offensive line by Pro Football Focus is rated as like the number one offensive line in college football. A lot of people like it. You know, you got Caden Proctor came back. You got Jaden Roberts, big guy out of Houston. This is going to be this Alabama team. I think they're going to be going out there going, okay, Texas, you beat us at Bryant-Denny last year, but Georgia is as strong a team. If you look at the blue chip index, Ohio State's number one at 90% of their roster is 4- and 5-star players. Alabama's second at 88. Now, put that in perspective. You lose Nick Saban. You have two guys in that freshman class. One went to Florida, one went to Ohio State, and 29 guys transferred out or processed out or whatever. You still ended up with the number 2 recruiting class in the country, and you're still number 2 on the blue chip index. I mean, Alabama is not going anywhere. I think people have forgotten that this is a team that one bumbled play on the goal line away from playing for the national championship last year with a quarterback who was benched in the third game of the season at USF and ended up having, one of the best seasons of any quarterback in the country. Kind of take it from here, Dave.
Yeah. First off, is the sound better? I made an adjustment.
That's much better. We'll work it out with you. Don't worry.
Down just a little bit. Turn it down just a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little bit less. Yeah, but talk about that Alabama storyline because it gets me. It's like everybody's wanting to push Texas because they're the new girl at school. She just walked in the cafeteria and everybody's going, "Holy shnikes!"
Yeah, I printed out the SEC schedule this week and I'm just fascinated by it. I mean, you go if you look at every team in their road to the SEC championship to the 12-team playoff. I mean, lots of rocks in every road, and if you look at every week in the SEC, you can argue that every week in the SEC, 2 or 3 of the games are the best games in the country that week. I mean, it's just amazing. So focusing on Alabama, in the Saban era, after the first year, I guess after the first year, they pretty much won every game they were supposed to win, and didn't have not had a couple bad losses, but very, very, very few. So the real question here is as you go through their schedule and you look at Wisconsin and Madison, obviously Georgia and Tuscaloosa, move on to Tennessee, Missouri, LSU, Oklahoma. I mean, these are games that you would say, okay, a Nick Saban coach team would win. A team with 88% 4- and 5-star will win. But it's a new coach, it's a new program, and what if they lose to Wisconsin early on?
Buddy, let Doug Dean in. He's trying to get in the studio.
All right, I'll be glad to let Doug in.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, but keep going, Dave, because I want to bring up something that was brought up by Gary Harris from Tuscaloosa yesterday about DeBoer. But keep going.
Yeah, so let's just take a worst. Obviously, I don't want any of this to happen being a big Alabama fan, but let's say they get jumped around in Madison and lose to the Badgers. And then they lose Georgia and Tuscaloosa. Now they're 2-2, and they're playing. Well, they Vanderbilt. Okay, fine. Then they host South Carolina. Well, natives start to get restless. This isn't working out. We were too hasty in hiring this guy. Whatever. I mean, just a bunch of garbage narrative, but it's narrative out there. And how would the alumni respond? More importantly, how would the team respond? How would the locker room respond? And that's what's so fascinating about this SEC season coming up is that storyline that is told about Alabama, you can repeat that across 8 or 9 schools in the SEC. Obviously, Buddy's school, Florida, that's probably the most compelling story because that's a team that could, go 8-4, 9-3, or they go 1-11, and only win. Who's their Sanford, I believe. So it's just, I can't wait for this. This is just fascinating.
It is. And Doug, jump in with us. Kalen DeBoer, Gary Harris pointed out yesterday, he's got 6 commitments in this class for Alabama from the state of California and 5 from Alabama.
Well, they're on a heater recruiting, and I think he's smart enough to know, and he'll probably have some people that have been around the Alabama program, legendary program for a long time, that will say, you better get your share of recruits in the state of Alabama. He knows that. And then the deep South, but Saban's the one really that started going after the best players kind of wherever they are. Dave, you agree with that?
Yeah, and that tradition has continued, and I give Kalen DeBoer a gold star for his first one of the questions was, can he recruit like SEC schools recruit? Well, looks like he can.
Yeah, I think so.
Even after they lost so many people to the portal.
And then go ahead, finish your thought, Dave. I'm sorry.
And then, but the next question becomes, what I was the point I guess I was rambling about was, can he coach in the SEC? And that remains to be seen.
But great to see you live on air, buddy Martin. I hope you're doing well, my friend.
Well, I am live and I am on there and I'm back home. So glad to be. I had the internet problems on Tuesday.
Oh, it's
Rob,
yeah.
The show we couldn't get up there. It's been all over the place. So I'm no Brendan Martin, but I'll be here trying. And good to see you. By the way, if anybody doesn't have their noise cancellation on, turn it on so we don't get any feedback there. Okay, whatever that means. But
just to kind of bring y'all up to speed, a global satellite has been taken out and it is knocked out. There's no internet in Gainesville or Ocala. And so this morning, Buddy got the message from Brendan to me. So, Buddy, I'll tell you one thing. We're going to make it happen. But Doug, pick up on this one because there's a lot of storylines. And I talked to an NIL guy yesterday. I'm going to throw that into the fire. Some cool content.
Hey, Rob, can I jump in real quick on that comment? I wanted to mention what Doug said and what Dave said, mentioning Florida just as a case. Like, here's an interesting concept to think about. You don't have to comment about it now. We broke this down with Alec Peak at Wilbur the other day, and I've broken the SEC Sweet 16, which is what we're calling it, into 4 quadrants. The best, the second best, third best, and fourth best. It's really interesting when you look at it like that because if you say, okay, well, this team is better, but where do you put them? Who are you going to knock out? So it's interesting if you look at it. We know who the first quadrant is, pretty easy. The only question might be whether you want to put Ole Miss up there or you think Missouri is the case. And by the way, Missouri's schedule, piece of cake. Alec pointed out tonight, they could very well win 10, 11 games without much of an effort. So just think about that for a second, Doug. And Dave, you're going into the SEC media days. How do we look at this? What is the perspective and how do we break it down?
Yeah, and I want to circle back to Dave's. I might have caught you slightly in the middle, but I think I know the gist of what Dave was talking about, the fascination of the schedule with moving to 16 teams. And the 2 we're adding they're not slouches, they're not bums, are they? But
no,
they may have a slight adjustment period, which would be forgivable to, start playing, you're bruised and beat up after playing even a Mississippi State or whoever it may be. And the next week you don't get to play a directional school, tuning up for the Red River Shootout. You play 5 or 6, sometimes 7 games that are losable unless you're Alabama or Georgia. And so in the case of Alabama, Dave, you're right there. If it does not go, brilliantly, it doesn't have to be pretty wins. We all enjoy that. Pretty wins, you reel off 5 or 6 pretty wins. In some ways, it can be dangerous. You start to feel too good about yourself. And then you kind of get the fat head. And like Saban said, the rat poison, it's so dangerous when you're trying to deal with 19 and 20-year-old athletes. And you see NFL teams, when they lose, sometimes it's more mental. They're all roughly equal, at least maybe in 3 tiers in the NFL. They're equal enough that you can get beat any Sunday. But the thing, Dave, not a trick question, and somebody like you will remember it with ease, but Gene Stallings' record his first 3 games in 1990. You recall that?
I think 0-3.
Yeah, and so it did not. Yeah, and then one of those I think was Southern Miss, but if memory serves, that might have been with Brett Favre.
It was Brett Favre. They lost to Southern Miss in Legion Field.
And Brett Favre beat Auburn that year too. Not that that's in the same league as beating Alabama, but the point being that 0-3 did not in any way portend the really good things Stallings did. Now especially that 92 season. Now you could say, well, that was a one hit wonder. I don't know that that's fair. There were a lot of other factors at work in Stallings leaving or being encouraged to leave or deciding to leave on his own. It would take a Bama guy like Dave to know the real insight on that. It's probably mutual for whatever reason. But so this year, this is when athletic directors earn their money and power brokers that have influence, like Paul Bryant Jr. and whoever it may be. If DeBoer, who I think is a very good hire, I mean, time will tell where he is on the GOAT scale that Nick Saban created, that almost no one, that's the wrong standard to expect if you're reasonable. Not that fans are ever reasonable, but if DeBoer should stumble a couple of times before you get to midseason or that Tennessee game, which is October 19th in Knoxville, then it will not anymore pretend that he was a bad hire than Stallings was when he went 0-3. So that's when you've got to be patient and say, this is our guy. We keep recruiting. And we're in a new world order where losing 2 games a year is about normal to make the play. You're going to have 2 loss national champions. Get used to it.
Yeah. Let me throw this one in there. Yeah. Doug, Dave, I want to throw this to both of y'all. I talked to a guy that runs an NIL collective yesterday for a major program. Talked to him for about half an hour. He said, in the past in recruiting, and we're full transparency on this show. So said in the past, there were the 3 C's of recruiting before we had NIL: cash, clothing, and cars. That's just what it was. He said, now the 3 C's are campus,
there's
culture.
I can't say it on air.
Yes, that's right. But now the 3 C's are campus, culture, coaching. And I asked him about some NIL and some guys, and he said, bottom line is some collectives don't touch them till they get on campus. Some are involved in getting them to campus. But he said that once these kids get this money and they're having to spend their own money, he said, you'd be surprised how cheap they are. They like looking at it. So anyway, interesting take on that. Dave Tompkins.
Yes. So I'm going to go back to Doug's point, and I will. First off, I intellectually agree with you 100%, Doug. I'll take a contrarian view and argue that the context now is dramatically different than it was in 1990. First off, Gene Stallings was Coach
I offer
Bryant's.
No rebuttal to that.
Gene Stallings was
Nothing's
Coach
different.
Bryant's boy. I mean, he was a Junction boy. He survived that hell in Junction, Texas, and and then coached at Texas A&M and beat him, and all of that. And he was also following Bill Curry, a great man who unfortunately just had a real rough go of it in Tuscaloosa, who followed the late Ray Perkins, who took down the tower and all that. So Coach Stallings had a lot more rope than I think Coach DeBoer is going to have. My opinion. I want to give him rope. He deserves rope. I mean, he this first season he deserves a pass in my opinion. I do think they made the right hire long term, and I don't want to see Alabama go through what it went through after Coach Bryant. What we're seeing now with the Los Angeles Lakers, and they've had like 7 or 8 coaches since Phil Jackson. Let's don't be penny wise and pound foolish in terms of a long-term investment in this guy who is a proven winner. What a great program he built overnight in Washington, and I believe he can do it in Tuscaloosa. But yeah, I think the biggest change this year is that Coach Saban, for nearly every year, he only found himself in a 1-score game in the fourth quarter once or twice, max 3 times a season. This Alabama team, I believe, is going to find itself in 1-score games in the fourth quarter nearly every game. And that is, I mean, the pressure there, the fans, the noise, Jalen Milroe, how's he going to handle this? All of that. I mean, and the fact that he's got a capable backup ready to come in. The dynamic is just going to be so different this year than it was on nearly every Coach Saban team.
Dave, what important clarification? I'm throwing an olive branch to my good Bama friends. Wouldn't you agree that what you just said would probably be the case if Nick were still coaching this year, that you're going to have tight late fourth quarter games? Or are you saying there's a drop off in coaching?
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think even if Coach Saban were coaching this team, they would find themselves in more 1-score games. But the fan base, and more importantly, the players aren't used to that. This is a kind of a virgin season, even if Coach Saban were to be coaching. And and when you're, you all know my other team is Army, and they're in one-score games. They're either getting blown out or they're in a one-score game every game. So, I know how it feels, to be an Army fan and to be a Stanford fan, but Alabama fans, particularly the generation that grew up with Coach Saban, they don't know how that feels.
Yeah. Yep. Let me throw this one in. I remember in 1991 driving down the old highway from Memphis to Auburn, going through Jasper. They're on 78.
78, US 78.
Yeah, and I remember that Friday, all the RVs heading down to Gainesville. Alabama played at Florida. That was the second game of the second season of Gene Stallings after 7-5 when they lost to Louisville in the Fiesta Bowl. And there were questions. And they went to the Swamp and got beat 35-0. And the wheels fell off. Doug, you and Dave remember that. And Buddy does too. And then Alabama reeled off 28 consecutive wins before they lost a game. It's so true. It's most often darkest just before dawn.
Yeah, I think there's go ahead.
No, well, I was just going to me, we got SEC Media Days coming up in Dallas. How soon is that, Rob? It's not next week, or is it?
No, it starts Monday.
Oh, cool.
We're heading to Dallas Sunday.
So when Media Days gets here, which should include Buddy Martin, if there's any justice in life. But to me, one of the obvious storylines, maybe the number one storyline, is life after Nick Saban. And, while a lot of the spotlight of that falls on the Crimson Tide and Coach DeBoer, it really falls on the whole conference. Because when you're talking about, we think Kirby Smart's going to run the table this year, and he did one year, and he could have came so close last year, and arguably should have been one of the 4 playoff teams. And who knows if they were to get a rematch, how that would go. And that's off the table now. When you got 12 teams, you're going to see Georgia and Alabama there. It'd be more uncommon that they're both not there, I think, for now than opposite. Yeah. But the question on my mind, it's intriguing and a little bit unanswerable until we see Kalen DeBoer's body of work 7 or 8 games in, is what is Alabama most missing? This sounds like a silly question, but I don't think it is. What is Alabama going to be most missing from Nick Saban this year? I don't really think it's schemes. Now, certainly he's a defensive genius, but they've got great coaches. And, nobody's reinventing how defense works at the college level. Sometimes the pros can do that. And then Saban's a hell of a recruiter. DeBoer seems to be matching that well enough. It's early, but he looks like he's doing it right. And then motivating and guiding. I think that I'll offer this and love to hear all 3 of you guys' opinion. I think what they'll most miss, which Saban is so unique at, is you can take 5-star players and high 4 stars, all these egos, and you can whip them around, beat them up mentally, tear them down, sell them on being a team player. Whereas a lot of coaches, an average coach, even an above average coach, what he would have is divisiveness, morale, locker room problems that we don't always hear about, but it affects that team and causes a loss or two. Saban, to me, was a master at that. I don't know if Kalen DeBoer brings that to the table, Dave.
Yeah. He may not. And I think, going back to Coach Stallings and Rob's point about, losing to Florida 35-0, and the next year they beat Florida the first ever SEC championship in Legion Field. Interception, Antonio Langham.
We remember it. Don't worry.
Town Creek, Alabama. Hazelwood.
Work that in there. But in my opinion, the most underappreciated person in Alabama lore is Brother Oliver. He was a defensive coordinator.
Absolutely.
And he was, defensive coordinator for Coach Bryant, and then Coach Stallings brought him back. I'll argue that he was the real reason for their success there and that national championship. I mean, you remember Gino Torretta in Miami? They just shut that team down. And Jay Barker was the quarterback. They didn't. That was a defense wins championships kind of championship team, and that was Bill Oliver. That was Brother Oliver. And so there's something to be learned there. I really believe, particularly as you look at a bunch of one-score games, boy, if you have a really good defensive coordinator and you can stop the other team, that's how you transition into, I think, a successful long-term run when you replace a legend like Saban.
You do, and I'll tell you what, Mark Ham, Rocky Top Tennessee Tailgate, Mark, who's on the show a lot, is in Italy right now vacationing. I don't know when he's coming back, maybe this week. It's just nice to be able to do that. So he's in a cooking class over in Florence with Gino Torretta. It goes, look who I'm with. So Gino's going to come on the show. So
Dave, real quick, Rob, Dave, Brother Oliver might be underrated in the annals of Auburn football coordinating.
I think he's the greatest defensive coordinator ever. I think he lives up around Gunnersville now. And I
had a Lake Martin place. I don't know if he still has it or not.
I would love to get him on the show. I mean, I know Logan Young loved him. He lived in the guest house at Logan's house in Memphis when he was coordinator for the Showboats. And, it was I think he's got 13 SEC championships and 5 or 6 national championship rings. And I dare say, and I'll throw this to anybody that wants to reply, if he would have come down from the press box when he was coaching the end of the season in 98 and gotten on the field, he just looked like, sounds like, he and Kevin Steele have that, I love that macho, masculine toughness. He would have been the head coach at Auburn. I really think he's from Epps, Alabama, but in 1969, he was the defensive backs coach for Auburn. And Dave Beck and some phenomenal defensive backs picked off 9 Florida passes when they beat the Gators in 1969. 9 in one game. Now, you're lucky if you get 9 for a season. You think
wasn't
about
Dave
that.
Beck the holder too for Gardner Jett? What they did?
Yeah. He goes,
I remember the Gary Sanders 17-16, but Beck got on the tee and Jett kicked it through.
Yeah, it was Dave Beck will hold, Gardner Jarrett will attempt on one of the biggest point afters you'll ever
which we had to live off of, Doug, for 9 years. It's good. Butch Lambert dropped his hat. Remember, Butch Lambert dropped his hat. I don't know what's going on.
Rob, I was talking
to death when he dropped his hat.
I was talking to the great Terry Henley since Dave was humble or foolish enough to bring up the punt game. But I told Henley that with having a few years for it to settle in, the kick six dramatic finish, and doing the impossible and probably the silly, comparing the punt Bama punt game and that dramatic finish, which wasn't on the last play, but may as well have been dramatically. Comparing those two, I'd almost call them a tie, but where I have to give the kick six 1A and punt Bama punt dramatic game 1B is that the stakes were so doggone high in that 2013 game.
Yeah.
I mean, Alabama was playing for another national championship. Auburn had a puncher's chance to sneak in, which they ended up doing. But the reason I'm not calling it 1 and 2 is if Gus had found a way to score once more or play defense against Florida State and won a natty, then all of a sudden that kick six looms even larger as if it wasn't large enough already.
Yeah, I think so. I want to switch gears real quick because Yancey Porter, Rebel Yell Hotline, is going to be on in a second. We're going to get his Ole Miss perspective. Buddy referenced a minute ago breaking into 4 quadrants. Missouri's a team that just jumps out at you with Brady Cook, Luther Burden III. They signed a couple of Power 5 running backs, guys, from Georgia State and, I don't know, Furman, another school, that combined for about 2,500 yards last year. No Cody Schrader. Schrader was a D2 guy who had 1,627 yards rushing last year from Missouri. Does anyone want to make a case, anyone, that Missouri makes the playoff? Because look at their schedule. Flip Florida and give them Missouri's schedule. And by the way, Florida's number 22 on a power ranking thing that I saw. I think I can't remember as many storylines going into the season. But Dave, could you make a case for Missouri? Anybody making the playoff?
Yeah, I'll talk quickly, but I want to turn it over to Doug just because I love to hear Doug say Missouri. So, I mean, the only in any other year, the only lost game is they go to Tuscaloosa. But they go to Tuscaloosa the week after Alabama is in Knoxville. So,
Yep.
and it's DeBoer's first year, and what if one score games and all that stuff? I mean, if that's their only really, really tough road game, that's a road game they can win. And if they win, and they take care of business, the rest, they can certainly make the playoffs. And it is really going to be interesting to see who is that other tier one. To Buddy's point, who's that other tier one, and is it Missouri? It may be. We shall see. This is the most we shall see season ever for the SEC, in my opinion.
It is.
That's great. That's great, by the way. It is great that we have this. And those teams in the middle there, those teams are in the second and third tier. Any of them could jump up and bite somebody else. But it's going to be really difficult. I'm going to bring up the term I've used this 100 times, but I'm going to keep using it because it's so true. Remember, when we talk about what the season looks like, and certainly Florida's back half looks like the Bataan Death March. I mean, what they got, but the bottom line is this is also a season of endurance. Think about this. I have a name for it, and the fact is that if you talk about prize fighters, if you fight top-ranked guys every 6 weeks, there's a residual impact on your body. It beats you down. And if you look at the schedule and see now who's off and who's on, that's why Missouri's got such a lightweight schedule. They ought to be locked to be one of the playoff teams.
Right.
But then you start looking at quadrants. Who do you knock in? Who do you knock out? So the question is, who will be left standing in November? Because you get pounded by Georgia and some of these teams, and you sit thinking, well, I thought Ole Miss had a chance to win 12 games. Suddenly you look at maybe 9 wins, 8 wins. It's going to be fascinating because the long-term pounding that you take is going to impact the winner and loser. Georgia's built for that. I'm not sure who else is.
And Mizzou, this was such a softball question, Rob. I can't resist this metaphor.
Missouri.
I'm sorry, guys, but Missouri is going to have to show me. Get it? This year. No, but look at October 5th. Texas A&M, we don't think of them as a power or a threat right now, but Mizzou goes to College Station. So that one's interesting. But they're at least on paper, and they'll talk about this media days. I'm sure Drinkwitz he'll be asked about this. There's a 3-game stretch. There is an open date in there on November 7th for Mizzou, November 2nd. But they get Auburn at home. Then they go to Tuscaloosa. That's an L, barring the unforeseen. And then they host Oklahoma. So that 3-game stretch is going to tell it. You could say that Auburn game is a must-win for Mizzou because some people will say Alabama and probably Oklahoma are losses. I'm not sure about Oklahoma. I want to see them for a few games, especially that September 28th in Jordan-Hare. But I think I've got Mizzou circled as one of the 2 or 3 teams, possibly including Ole Miss and maybe one other, which could be Oklahoma. I'm higher on Texas than I am Oklahoma. I've got them circled as a team that could have 2 losses at the end of the regular season. And the danger in that is if it's chalk, your reward for that is to go to the Benz and play Georgia, and they'll hang a 3rd loss on you all probability. And so you get left home because you couldn't beat Alabama, Georgia, and one of either Oklahoma or Auburn. That, to me, that's the book on Mizzou this year.
Good point.
Something I don't know but should know is, do you have to win your conference championship to be one of the top 4 seeds to get a first-round bye?
You do, yes.
Okay,
and here's the thing.
Because
I read a great take on that, is that people thought maybe people would pull over because they know they're going to the playoffs and not try to get to the conference championship game. No, you want to win your conference championship because you get an automatic first-round bye. Because if you don't, you're looking at playing 17 games. So it's going to be a war of attrition. And there are a lot of questions on here. We will be doing Sidelines from SEC Media Days in Dallas every week. So we'll be doing it live from Dallas, reporting on stuff. And also, I go back to this every week, every show. are Texas and OU, Dave, ready for the weekly pounding? I mean, it's one thing to say, hey, I just ran, 3 miles this morning. Well, can you do that again the next day and run 6? You gotta. It's different. It's one thing to have the Red River Shootout for Oklahoma and Texas. Okay, the next week after that big rivalry, let's see. Oklahoma after the Red River Shootout has to go to play South Carolina. Well, they got them in Norman, and Texas, who has an easy schedule, will have Well, they don't. The next week after that game, they go back to Austin and host Georgia. That's going to be the litmus test right there. I mean, there are a lot more examples, but it's the weekly pounding, Dave Tompkins.
Hey, wait. You can't say the Red River Shootout.
Absolutely.
No, you can't say it. Let's say you can't say world's largest outdoor cocktail party.
World's largest outdoor cocktail party.
Red River rivalry, dude. That's what they say. You better get used to all this new stuff when it comes to Texas.
I count out.
Corn dogs at Texas State Fair is still pretty good.
Hey, free speech is alive and well. Hey, Big Tex is out there. If they can fry it, they sell it at the Texas State Fair, Dave Tompkins.
And to me, that's one of the biggest we shall sees is, how will Texas and Oklahoma, fare in the gauntlet of the SEC schedule. While we were sleeping, the SEC basketball conference became one of the best 2 or 3 conferences, and correct. I think that explains, Alabama's run to the Final Four. So using basketball as an analogy, exactly. ACC was a 0 conference last year in basketball. North Carolina gets the 1 seed, but they had not played in conference a team as good as Alabama, and that's what happened in the Sweet 16. I think we're probably going to see the same thing. I would say definitely from Oklahoma and quite possibly from Texas, because they've just their team, their coaching staff, their fan base has never had to face a gauntlet like they're about to face. Now I think they'll adjust and they'll be there come year 2 or year 3. But again, yet another we shall see.
And Rob, if you think about it, to your question, how will Texas and Oklahoma adapt and prove if they can handle the gauntlet week in, week out?
Yeah,
we've in a way we've already answered that, because in recent years of the 14 teams, typically, at least 12 or 13 of them struggle to do better than 3 or 4 losses. And so I don't see why Texas and Oklahoma should be expected. Maybe the Longhorns this year, they seem to be loaded, especially in the trenches and with a good quarterback, but I don't see why they should be expected to come in and only lose 1, possibly 2 games. That's going to be hard for anybody in the league going forward.
Yeah, and that's it. Yancey Porter's on from Oxford Rebel Yell Hotline, and Yancey, Buddy Martin brought it up at the beginning of the show. These 4 quadrants people are trying to put, the SEC into this year. So your top 4 said, do you put in Ole Miss? Is Missouri in there? Ole Miss, the difference this year, the storyline on Ole Miss is, and you chronicled this better than anybody, and catch him Monday nights, folks, 6 p.m. Central, Rebel Yell Hotline, Sports 56, WHBQ in Memphis, and Super Talk Mississippi. And check out all of our sponsors today. We don't have Brendan, our producer, but, Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company, Matei's Garage, The Vitamin Shop, Rumble Boxing Gym, House Industries, the great folks there, Coolmore Logistics and Transportation, Memphis-based with a global reach. We'll talk more about them. But, Yancey, the defensive line, you listen and you think about it. That's where Ole Miss got whipped last year against Georgia. Had some linemen out, but depth. You got 12 guys that you say you would trust on the defensive front for Ole Miss. That's up a lot from last year. And let's talk about both lines of scrimmage. That's where this league is won, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And that's where Ole Miss really aimed to improve the most in the all season. They picked up 2 guys on the defensive line that were all conference in the SEC last year, in Princely and Walter Nolan. They picked up 5 offensive linemen that were Power 5 starters on the offensive line, because they got exposed there against Georgia when they had their 2 offensive tackles go out. 2 including there from Washington, that was the top offensive line in the country, so they feel like that they've really gotten deeper, more talented, and got some impact players on the line of scrimmage on both sides.
Yeah, and here's a comment from Buck Wade. I think Ole Miss is a lot better than most people think. Look, Lane Kiffin in the last 3 years has had a 10-win and then last year 11 wins, the most wins in regular season in Ole Miss history. And they got a hell of a tradition at Ole Miss. This year, the standards, their minds at Ole Miss is we're going to win every game. That's the difference. The confidence among Ole Miss people. There's always going to be people, fan bases, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But the difference in this Ole Miss team is 2 of those offensive linemen that you brought in were starters on the Washington Husky team that won the Joe Moore Award as the nation's best offensive line. Take that to the Beacon and talk about that getting an M16.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they really feel like on the offensive line they've got deeper, more talented, longer. Again, that Georgia game, but Georgia was the best team in the country last year, bar none. It wasn't even close. It was a shame they didn't make the playoffs. They would have probably walked through it, honestly. But you know, they had both their tackles go out there, Georgia, and the problem with Lane's offense. One thing is that he plays that pro style. By that I mean, there's not a lot of shuffling going in and out. I mean, those 5 offensive linemen are gonna pretty much play until their tongue falls off. So, they didn't have. It was also that there's no experience behind those guys. So we'll see if they do things a little bit differently this year, maybe give some rotation. And that's really become a trend in college football. There's not a lot of rotating on the offensive line, but they kind of got caught with their pants down there against Georgia, and they don't want that to happen again this year.
Hey
Yeah.
guys, while Yancey's here, I'm going to jump in here and say R.I.P. to Monty. What a
beat me
great
to it.
coach he was. And I got a wonderful picture, Yancey. I hope you can see this that I got last night off social media. That was Lane's. Remember this: we talk about these guys in the context of coaches, great coaches, jerks, whatever you want to call them. Bottom line is, they're all sons or fathers or husbands of other people. And when you see a picture like this, which I think is a great picture, you're reminded of the fact that Lane was his son and Monty was his dad. I
Yeah.
love this picture. The context of this picture right here, if you can see it, this is obviously a parade. I would think it's in Tampa. I don't know where it was. And you see it's Monty who's dressed like the Lone Ranger with the mask, and Lane is in front, and they're walking in the parade. That's a wonderful picture.
We look at that. We look at that cute little boy on the pony with his pops. Who could have told what a snarky, edgy guy that was going to be?
We were talking about Brother Oliver being so underrated. Monty Kiffin was a very, very underrated coach. I mean, he succeeded at every level, and it never seemed about him. It was always about the team and stuff. And I think we lost a great man there.
Absolutely. No
They
question.
should call that not the Tampa 2. They should call that the Monty 2. It should be named their defense they invented.
Yeah, I agree. The full Monty. All right, let me throw another one out there for you guys. I'm curious, and I want to get in a few minutes. We might possibly have one of the Olympic athletes join us for a few minutes to talk about the Ed Murphy Track and Field Classic going on up in Memphis this weekend. Then we'll get back to football, but I'm hoping I can get her on. But the bottom line is the Ole Miss storyline: better offensive linemen, a lot of defensive linemen. You bring in 2 All-SEC defensive linemen via the portal. That's what's changed so much, and it's hard to put a handle on. Hey, okay, your top 4. I'm going to ask each of y'all. I'll start with Dave, and then Doug and Yancey. Give me your top 4 teams right now in the SEC at this very moment. Things change by the minute, but at this moment, start with you, Dave Tompkins.
Go Georgia 1. I will go Texas 2. I will go Alabama 3. that's when it gets hard. That's when
Toddy, Toddy.
I will go. I will go Ole Miss. No, I'm not. I'm going to go LSU for it.
LSU?
No, Ole Miss. Yeah.
No peer pressure here.
It gets hard after the first three.
It is.
It's just that's. I think the best point that's been made on the show so far was the one that Buddy led off with about when you go from tier 1 to tier 2, and then the tier 2 and tier 3 teams are going to pull off some upsets. And I put Ole Miss for because they've had 10 and 11 win seasons, and they do have comparatively to the other SEC teams a very a manageable schedule.
Yeah, Doug Dean in Birmingham.
And I'm sorry if we influenced you there, Dave. You're an independent thinker, but if Yancey had his live animated mug instead of a still shot, he would have influenced us differently.
Yes, he would. A lot of eye contact.
So this show needs some more controversy, Rob Browne. Boy, am I gonna this will get it going. Without as much data to back me up as I'd like, and cutting against the sort of the angry mob of longtime SEC schools, who both the top two of whom have won a bunch of championships lately. I'm going to shock the world a little bit and call Texas my number one team going into the season. Now that it won't take too long to disprove that, but I just think I respect Sark. I mean, to be able to come into Tuscaloosa and win that one a year ago it's one game, sure, but it shows you what he's capable of. And I don't think he will be intimidated this first year coming in. Some of his players might, especially younger ones, but it's real close. Texas, Georgia, you got to have Alabama third. They didn't quit playing football just because Nick retired. They did lose some key players. The one that would worry me the most is Caleb Downs, because as a true freshman, he had led the team in tackles, if memory serves. And then I feel the pressure of Yancey's face staring right at me. I think Ole Miss gets the benefit of the doubt. I mean, they're loaded. Lane Kiffin. Every Ole Miss fan understands that they get to find out about life with a huge target on their back. But you want that. You want to get to the point where people believe you've got depth and a roster and a quarterback, and it's certainly got a coach that you can handle that. And maybe the first step is to try it, and you get knocked off a couple of times. But the good news is Ole Miss can still make the playoff if it is 2 losses. So that's my 4. Then you look at possibly Oklahoma or Mizzou, but they're going to have to both show me.
Yeah. Yancey Porter from Oxford, Mississippi.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you hate to sound like a homer with the school you cover, but I know this team inside out. Georgia, undoubtedly number one. To me, they're the best team again. They were the best team last year. They were the best team the year before. Everybody cried about who did and didn't make it last year, and nobody cried about Georgia not making it. And I'm sure the other 4 teams were on their hands and knees saying thank you for that. Georgia won, and I've got Ole Miss too. And then I think there's a gap after that. Like you're saying, after 3, there's question marks. I think Georgia and Ole Miss are the cream of the crop of the SEC this year. And then, I'm going to go Alabama 3. I still have question marks about the quarterback there at Alabama, new coach. And then after that, that's where there's some debate to me on that 4 spot. On paper, you would say Texas. Bo Davis leaving there. Those three stud defensive linemen there at Texas, all got drafted this year. I'm still going to put them at the 4 spot. Mizzou could make that, but I'm gonna end it with Texas.
All right, let's do this. I want to bring in everybody. Hold these thoughts. I'm going to come back. I want to talk a couple of minutes here with one of the Olympic athletes that's in town for the track and field classic. When we come back, I've got a rapid fire thing we're going to do for extended extra innings Friday. If you can bring Sam in, I'd love to get you in. Let's talk right now. I think you're in town 11th, 12th, and 13th of July, Ed Murphy Track and Field Classic. Eddie was on yesterday. How many Olympians are here, and how many of them are going to be going to Paris in just a few weeks to represent the United States? You got us?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah. We can hear you. Yeah,
All right. Well, I think the tally for Olympians competing in the Ed Murphy Classic is around 55 to 62, something like that. It's incredibly hard to get all those mercenaries on in one time zone, let me tell you. And I think 16 active, which means 16 current, which means 16 serving on our team right now.
All right, tell me this. I know it's at the South Campus, University of Memphis. You had all the field events yesterday: shot, discus, high jump, long jump. That's money in the bank before you even start the event at a track meet. That's go. We got a SEC heavy audience, obviously. SEC Sideline Sports Network, also the Buddy Martin Show. University of Florida, 14 national championships in track and field. Mouse Holloway, pretty damn good coach. You saw Leroy Burrell. Auburn finished second, 1 point behind them for the national title this year. Everybody knows that you can't get to track heaven without a stop in Eugene, Oregon out there. But what's the collegiate representation like from the SEC here at the Classic? And I know, of course, Eddie Murphy's dad, Ed, was a Tennessee Volunteer, big time. I never saw the man when he wasn't wearing something orange and white.
Yeah, well, my aspersions towards the Volunteers are none. So the funny thing is the SEC is heavy in track. They always have been. They've been a powerhouse, a real money circuit for sure. Because we don't. One of the hardest things to do in track and field is get everybody together, right? Get all the teams together. Bring all the city states together. And the SEC does it best. They compete against each other all the time, and that brings a high amount of competition together. I think Arkansas wins the cake with number of athletes that have been Olympians. But when it comes to collegians, hot off the press, we have guys like Keaton Daniel, straight from Kentucky, two-time national champion. Now he's jumping with the big boys in the field events. And I always like to think of the field events like the garnish on a track meet, right? Everybody comes to watch the sprints. The time goes 10 to 15 seconds later or 45 seconds later, it's over. And I say, hey, how do we fill the time? Man, that's the field events. You want to get into the story of the field events. The field events are the story of the day. The sprint events are the story of the week.
I tell everybody right now about the pole vault on Beale Street and the crowd that you have down there. This is one of the most spectacular things I've ever seen. But tell them those numbers. This is ginormous.
Well, the cool thing is what event can we take out of a stadium? Stadiums are big, can't fit them everywhere. What event do we cut out, put in a frame, and bring to the people? Well, pole vault's about the only one that fits. It's really hard to build a 100-meter track. It's really hard to put a discus arena out there. But pole vault and shot put are something we can bring to the masses. And they bring two incredible different things. We picked pole vault for Beale Street because, hey, it's a lively place. Pole vault builds a lively show. And all of a sudden, you walk up to it, and it brings something out of you. They're like, that's not right. That's really not right. They're not supposed to be doing that. They're not supposed to be going that high. They're not supposed to be running that hard and then flying in the air. And that brings a crowd faster than just about anything else because you can see it from a long way away too. Yeah. It's a bit like a circus act.
Yeah, like 20,000 people down on Beale Street to watch the pole vault. That's
absolutely,
that's
and it's a packed house, corner to corner. I'm telling you, it's hot. It may smell like 1,000 different things in a bar scene, but my goodness, people like to jump out there. And I'm bringing my boys to Beale Street tomorrow night so that we can put on a show.
Well, and they'll be serving those big 32-ounce jugs of beer down there. It's going to be a lively atmosphere. Tell me a couple of more things. What are the top times right now for the U.S. in, say, the 100, the 200, 400, and what are we looking to do in Paris? Because this is, SEC, whatever happens around the country, when one of our teams is winning another national championship, you'll hear just SEC, SEC, SEC. Texas and Oklahoma don't quite understand that yet, but they're about to.
Not yet.
Yeah, talk about just how powerful this is. But I want to hear about these times because they just every time we think we've seen it, we hadn't seen it.
Well, I want to bring you into the core of track. What does it look like? What are you watching when you watch a sprint event? Am I just watching the clock? Am I watching the man? Am I watching the rivalry? Which piece of it is? And I want you to think about track like stud poker, right? Everybody's going to the track knowing what they have, right?
Yeah.
They're just trying to convince everybody else they've got the bluff. So when you're going in a sprint event, you've got to survive the rounds, right? And that's what hardy athletes are able to do. Hardy athletes come from well-competed schools like the SEC schools. That's why we have a over-representation whenever it comes to an Olympics or World
Yeah.
Championships or things like the Ed Murphy Classic, is because guys that are hardy, they survive to the river card by the end, and that's the final. Who's going to have it on the day? In the 100, you've got to break through prelims and have that sub 10-second 100 in your pocket. You just got to be able to pull it out.
Wow.
And that's not easy for most people. That's a world-class time, top 300 in history, just to make the dang semifinal. And you're going to have to do something amazing just to get a lane for the final bit. And we bring out heroes all the time, and heroes are made on the track, but they know what they can do beforehand. We're just trying to unleash them when we get to the big show.
We got any big guys like I grew up Herschel Walker and Bo Jackson when I was at Auburn. Willie Gault out of Griffin, Georgia, was at Tennessee. These guys were just phenomenal, and they make great football players, especially when they could run a route. Name a couple of guys, and Eddie, before we let y'all go, just tell people how they can get tickets, how they can get there and everything. But I love track and field. It makes every sport better. I call track and field your insurance policy for every sport you play, and it's your insurance policy for life. Yeah.
Everybody needs track.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, yeah, absolutely. The big name players are guys that are going to be in their second or third games, or they're going to be coming to the Ed Murphy Classic with real big goals. They want to come prove that their model works for the track. You know, the dual sport athletes of what you're talking about. Hey, track is insurance. I love the dual sport era. I want to bring that back. I'm actually standing out here at my training center right now trying to bring the dual sport era back to track and field because, man, I want some muscly, strong, strapping fellows out on the track to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because they got to have confidence. And confidence is bred on the track. There's no hiding behind anything. You pull those warm-ups off, you put on your speed suit, and the clock never lies. And so, I mean, once you get to that point, it's all gloves are off.
Yeah, and Eddie, you know this, and how many times have you been out early in the morning running on a 5 or 10 mile run, and about 5 minutes into it, you're like, why am I doing this? But you can't quit, because if you quit, you'll quit everything else in life. Eddie, tell people about this event. I love this. This is the 8th year. It's getting bigger every year, but people need to support this, and they need to come to it.
You know, it's absolutely awesome. Even having Sam Kendricks right here talk about, you know, Olympian, going to be in Paris, wearing the red, white, and blue. You know, everybody, our audience, SEC dominant show that you're on right now. 12, how many states, Rob? 12 states that you're on. I mean, it's amazing to lift them up. You know, that's really the good thing about this, to lift the American athlete, give them a platform to talk about what they do. I mean, how cool is Sam? I'd love to have about 5 or 6 beers with him over about a few hours and just listen to the stories, you know. Paul Doyle, who's been on your show. All these things. And, you know, like today, we've got Johan Blake. I mean, he's going to be running tonight. Alicia Johnson. I mean, we got 16 other people they're going to be wearing the red, white, and blue, or Jamaican, or whatever they are, that are going to be, you know, dominating, hopefully in Paris, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just a great opportunity. 4:45 today at University of Memphis South Campus. We go live stream all over the world tonight at 6 o'clock. And the cool thing about it, it's not really a long event tonight. It's 8. You're done at 8. You know, tomorrow night on Beale, a little bit different story. We got the Murphy Mile at 4:30, starting and stopping right there on Beale Street. And then the women, Sandy Morris, they're going to put on a show at 5:30. And then the big dogs come out to eat about 7:30 tomorrow night. It's going to be awesome.
Well, it is going to be incredible. I'll be over there. I just want to say this, that I'm glad you're doing this. We need more of this, and we need to be promoting track and field because it makes every other sport better. But it's all the 11th, 12th, and 13th in Memphis. Get out there, do yourself a favor, and take your family and friends. It's worth every penny.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, Rob. Appreciate you,
bet.
Sam.
Thank y'all so much for coming on. I appreciate you, Sam. I'm with you. I want to drink a few road sodas with you. I look forward to meeting you.
I got 10 years worth of good stories. I'll see you guys soon.
All right. Thank you. Guys, I got to tell you what he just said. I just wanted to get that in. I've known Eddie since kindergarten. I love track and field. And he talked about, you know, multi-sport athletes. It is incredible. All right. Let me throw my 4 for the playoff. I'm going to go with Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Missouri. I'm not buying the Texas hype. Nothing against Texas. I mean, look, I'm just saying Bo Davis is that big a deal, the defensive line coach, shifting to LSU. But I'm not buying LSU because LSU, Jacques Doucet said it a couple of weeks ago from Channel 9 in Baton Rouge. They're deficient on the defensive line. They always have athletes. They're just lacking the numbers now, Doug. That's what I'd be concerned about with LSU.
If the judge would say, Mr. Dean, would you like to redirect on that? And yes, I would. The reason it was audacious to say Texas is my best team. The good answer, the defensible answer there is Georgia, like Yancey said. But the reason I wanted to be controversial there, look at their schedule. They get Michigan their second game. Texas does, and that's it. It's in Ann Arbor. That's a kind of a must-win, based on the premise that when they get to literally the midpoint of their season, it's back-to-back Oklahoma in a revenge game of sorts, and then Georgia. So my logic is beat Michigan, and then you could even afford to lose to Oklahoma and Georgia, and you're in the playoffs almost certainly. Because if you look at the back end of their schedule, yeah, they could lose to Florida, but it's in Austin. Then they got Arkansas, Kentucky, and Texas A&M. Now that Texas A&M game, I'm probably going to like the Aggies because it's in College Station.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Texas' schedule is a little more favorable than meets the eye.
Yeah. Yancey, throw this one in there for Ole Miss. Your quarterback room. Let's say Jackson Dart goes down game 3. Walker Howard, who is it? Spencer Sanders took his 300 and left.
Hey,
you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that was a great move by Spencer, right? He
Absolutely.
got a nice check. We all knew he wasn't going to be quite good enough for the NFL, so make your money. I think it's going to be Walker Howard. Simmons, had a little injury during baseball season. He had a strained UCL. That was the good news. The bad news is that, he had a strained UCL, so it took him out of spring practice for a while. I think Walker got some invaluable reps, but Simmons is very, very capable. That's where a Lane Kiffin team is always going to be deep, right? It's quarterback, and they got 3 that they think that can play anywhere in the country. And a fourth one, Anthony Maddox, that they picked up as a freshman from Oak Grove, that might have been the surprise of the spring camp. He graduated early and went through spring drills, so they feel like that they're well equipped there at quarterback. Obviously, if anybody loses their quarterback, it is very, very difficult to advance. Only some of those Saban teams that were just so much better than everybody else at every other position can withstand a quarterback loss. But if Dart were to go down, I do think it would be Walker Howard right now.
Out of Lafayette, Louisiana, Jamie Howard's son. Losing your quarterback is like trying to sail without a mast. It's just, all right, buddy, I want to hear your quadrant. Yeah, absolutely, you can. You're on the show.
Yeah, I don't have 4, but I got these quadrants. I want you guys to tear this list apart, okay? Then tell me who you put in their place. My contention is that it's crowded, especially in the middle. The middle, somebody's got to jump out of there, but who is it going to be? When you look at this list, by the way, this is not a scientific list. I just took the teams and broke them down. If I get them all here, hold on a second, and I'll read the quadrant 1, 2, 3, and so on. And then you guys tell me, well, you're full of beans. They don't belong in there. This is who should go. But then you begin to see it's like a jigsaw puzzle. That piece doesn't fit there. Where does it fit? And then who do you knock out? It's pretty complicated when you start thinking about it that way. So I'm going to get my list up here. Let's start with the 4 quads. 4. All right, this would be the teams. I don't want to call them bottom feeders, because somebody can jump out of there. I don't know who. But the teams who I think will be quadrant 4 with probably around 5 wins or fewer are, and tell me if I'm wrong, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Mississippi State, and South Carolina. Who wants to make a case to any of those teams?
Agree.
Anybody want to make a case for those
Possible
teams?
exception of South Carolina. I think South Carolina is going to win a couple games they shouldn't, because they always do. But otherwise, I agree.
That would mean they have to win 6 or 7 games. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think State's going to surprise some people. I think they're going to be not as bad as people think. Look, I'm a big believer of Jeff Lebby. I think they're going to be exciting to watch. I don't know about how many wins they're going to get, but I think they're going to be the best team out of that list you just put right there, buddy.
All right, then who you knock out of Group 3? Okay, who 6 to 7 wins? All right, Texas A&M, Auburn, Florida, or Kentucky?
I'll be the loudmouth.
Florida,
I think. Go ahead, Lancey. I'm sorry.
I apologize, and I'll say it quickly. I didn't mean to interrupt. I think Florida and Auburn are going to be the most improved teams in the SEC this year. Now, does that mean that they're going to have the most improved record because of Florida's schedule? I don't know. But I think Florida and Auburn are going to give everybody fits. I think they're going to be really improved. I think there's a reason why that Auburn didn't go out and get a showcase quarterback. I've had some conversations with Freeze off the record. I think Auburn's going to be very salty this year, and I think Florida is too. I really like what they're doing with their team. I think that record on paper looks, just really, really, really undoubtedly tough. But I think both those teams are going to be the most improved teams in the SEC this year.
I'm still a believer in Napier. I give him one more year of stay of execution, and I think he will prove enough. But the problem is he can do a lot better and it not necessarily excite his fan base in terms of wins and losses. Hopefully they're going to really have to use intelligence and look at degree of difficulty and hang in there. But thank you for your take on Auburn, Yancey. It would be foolish to start calling Auburn a contender to only lose 2 games and make the playoff. It's too soon for that. But I really like this wide receiver room, and I think the addition the replacement of 2 coordinators where that's normally disruptive, it'll add up to Hugh Freeze being far more comfortable. In fact, I've verified that's where he stands. And I think that will mean Peyton Thorne is just good enough. He's not going to be a Heisman candidate, and he probably won't be better than top 4 or 5 in the league, but he's good enough with the talent they've got for Auburn to get to 8 wins, knocking on the door of 9 wins at some point.
Okay, going back to Mississippi State as a quad 4.
Yeah.
So you put them as a quad 4. They go out to Tempe and they beat Arizona State, and Arizona State might have a winning record in the Big 12. I mean, you're going to see a lot of things like that as we compare the SEC to the rest of the conferences.
Good point. Let's go back to the premise of what we're going to do with Mississippi State. And that's a quadrant. So, well, they're better. Well, who do they replace in the group above them? And then when you talk about Texas, you talk about Florida and Auburn, who do they replace above them, right? So
LSU.
Think of it that way. All right, let's go to quadrant 3. All right. This is quadrant 2, excuse me. This is the 8 to 9, maybe 10 wins. We'll see. Group 2. LSU, Tennessee, Oklahoma, and Missouri. Anybody want to make a case for any of those teams not being in there or being above?
I think you kind of question the premise that, all we've got to go by is last year and what the rosters look like this year. And some of the programs are so powerhouse traditionally that you got to give them, top quadrant. But I question LSU just showing up and being automatically good. They struggled to win enough games last year, despite having that Heisman QB. And Nussmeier's going to have to show me that he's capable of getting them to, 9 or 10 wins. So I think LSU's a question mark. Long term, I love LSU. Since Duffy's
where's
not
Frank
on the
Duffy
show.
when you need him?
I know. He's Daniel Simpson Day, whereabouts unknown. I hope he's okay.
And I think Mizzou possibly is poised for a little bit of a drop off because they were so good last year, but we'll see.
But look at their schedule. It's a cakewalk.
Yeah.
We talked about it the other night on the schedule. Allie broke it down. And there's no way they can't win 10 games. They're just so it's the easiest schedule in the league.
Yeah,
anyway, so back to the premise of if you not put them in, who you knock out. So I agree with you on LSU question mark, but where do they go? Now here's a group 1 quadrant. Obviously Georgia, Alabama, Texas, and Ole Miss or Missouri. I've got Ole Miss in there.
Yeah. Ole Miss.
Ole Miss.
I don't think Missouri is strong enough along the line of scrimmage to be in that first quad. And I also think that LSU is going to be better than people think because the Bo Davis factor. This guy, he flips every defensive line that he goes to.
He
And
does.
what was LSU's? What was their kryptonite last year?
Defensive
They
line.
couldn't stop the run. I
Yeah.
mean, it was like running through butter, and that
Yeah.
will change immediately. So LSU's everybody's going to point towards the quarterback there, Nesmar. But their biggest thing to me is how strong is that running game going to be? If they
Yeah.
can get a really good running game going, they could be scary good.
They can. Doug, I want to throw something to you. I talked to a guy who's been to a lot of Auburn practices yesterday. He goes to every one of them. He'll remain anonymous. But he said, let me tell you something. There is a 179-degree difference in this freshman class that's out there this summer and the ones that were there in the spring and the upperclassmen. He said, Cam Coleman's had 12 college practices. He goes, I don't think people have a clue of what this guy is. He goes, he's a generational talent. He said, you look at Amarius Mims, you look at Jamonte Waller, he said, you look at Perry Thompson. He goes, these guys are just a head taller, they're bigger, they're stronger, and they're freshmen. They are freshmen. But I'll tell you, the guy that Doug Dean, I'm going to give you credit, because I feel like the patient with Bob Newhart. Doug calms me down so much because he listens, but he thinks through things. And I thank y'all, by the way, all of y'all for joining us on this show. We've been a crazy day, buddy. Unbelievable job. Brendan calling in airstrikes from behind, but Yancey, Dave, Doug, unreal. But
hey, hold on,
I
guys.
want to say
1 second before you go. We talked about this point about Missouri. I believe, who was it that said Missouri didn't have the goods? Listen to the schedule. Tell me where the wins are, okay? Missouri plays Murray State, W. Missouri plays Buffalo, W. Missouri plays Boston College, probably a W. Missouri plays Vanderbilt, W. And then they're 4-0 going into Texas A&M at A&M. Give them a loss there, maybe. Then Missouri plays UMass, W. Missouri plays Alabama, L. Missouri plays Oklahoma, L. Missouri plays South Carolina, W. Mississippi State, W. And Arkansas, W. I think that's a lot of wins right there, guys. That's at least 9, okay? So you look.
They're better than people think. Luther Burden III is the best player in the SEC, the wide receiver. Doug, I want to throw something to you. You called this guy last year when all these 5 stars were flipping to Auburn. I got to give you credit. I think the most underrated guy in this freshman class coming in at Auburn is a kid named Malcolm Simmons. And I say that because I look at his track and field. What he hit, close to 27 in the long jump. I mean, this guy's out of Benjamin Russell in Alex City. And that's a guy, and Bryce Kane, this guy's Olympic speed fast out of Baker in Mobile. But the guy said that, he goes, Rob, these guys, Freeze, he said, one thing about Freeze is he loves people. And anyone that knows Hugh Freeze, and in Memphis, I know a lot of his friends, he actually loves recruiting. I'm talking loves it like, Robert Plant loves to play, and sing and write music. Doug, that's powerful when you've got a guy that wants to do that. And now, and Yancey knows Derek Nix. He knows all these guys. He's got the band. 6 of the 10 coaches on Freeze's staff have coached with him before. Last year, he was out of his comfort zone. And he's got the guru, Ken Austin. People don't know how good this guy is. I watched him in high school at Brentwood Academy. I've always followed his career. Doug?
Philip Marshall on your show last Friday, you'll remember, Rob. Philip Marshall shared with the listeners that he had talked to Ken Austin specifically about Peyton. And Austin, he's not got no reason to wildly exaggerate, but he's extremely high on Peyton Thorne's capability, and especially considering that he gets a full spring and summer this. He came in June a year ago, and he was bad. He made bad reads, bad run reads. But it also was a case where Hugh Freeze himself, he's told his close friends, probably including Yancey, that he just was a little bit miserable. It didn't fit. He brought in a coordinator that thought that it was a good idea to rush 2 people on 4th and 31. And Roberts did a few good things, but I still have PTSD from that.
I do too.
And
Bob Newhart, help me through this one. Help me, please.
You need to help me through that one. That's going to hurt for a
It
while.
ain't a sideline show if 17-16, kick 6, and 4th and 31 all don't come up. I mean,
if it had to be Saban's last Iron Bowl, why not, right? But, point being, Hugh is extremely comfortable. I don't look at this, oddly enough, as the disruption of breaking in a new court. Hugh is the coordinator, and no offense to Derek Nix, and that's Lane Kiffin is going to have fun with that storyline. You can bet at media days, and I hope he does, because that's what makes it worth tuning in when Lane's at the microphone. Yeah. But I just think that everything points to an upward trajectory with the roster, the running back room, God knows the wide receiver room, and that offensive line. It's huge. There's depth and quality depth, and we finally have actual true prototypical offensive tackles. So we'll see. It's going to all turn on how comfortable Hugh can get Peyton Thorne running that RPO. Somebody asked Hugh, what's your run pass ratio going to be? He said the defense gets to decide that. In other words, I'm agnostic. You show me what you want to commit to, and we're going to smoke you by using the RPO. If you're going to ying, we're going to yang. And once that, give them a few games to the first 5. All of September's in Jordan-Hare. All of October is on the road, which is weird as hell. But I think Hugh Freeze lives up to his billing this year, but it won't be enough to beat some of the really top-tier teams that Buddy's talking about. Yeah.
This season, there's so many storylines, and SEC Media Days is going to be exciting because, like you said, Lane Kiffin, what's he going to talk about? But Derek Nix is from Attala. He's from Etowah County. He knows, he grew up, he went to Southern Miss. He's one of their top 5 all-time rushers. But I think Dave, y'all all know this, familiarity in coaching, sports, in business. You like working with people that you trust. That's the most important thing you can have, is that you trust them. And that, I love this.
Here are my top 4 storylines for the SEC this year, in no particular order. We're talking about quadrants. So number 1 is, who's the quad 1? Is it Ole Miss or Missouri? Number 2, what's Florida's record when they go to Knoxville game 6? And are they 5-0? Are they 4-1? Are they 3-2? What's their record when their gauntlet starts? Number 3, how does Texas and OU fare in the gauntlet of an SEC schedule? And then, of course, the elephant in the room, literally Alabama, and how do they do in Madison, and then go to then host Georgia, and what happens from there, and how much rope is.
Those are great storylines. And I'll say this: if you're 5-0 going to Knoxville, Florida, your locker room's a lot different than if you're 3-2. And those guys will say, "We ain't losing this game, Doug."
John, and just remember, I'm only sharing this opinion so that I can use a tremendous Woody Hayes quote, and that is, everybody right now is studying the NCAA stats of all these teams, the top tier, the second tier from last year, and projecting to this year. And Woody Hayes says, statistics remind me of that fellow who drowned in a river that the average depth was 3 feet.
Yeah, Woody Hayes taught a history class at Ohio State University. And I talked to a guy who was in his class. It was at 8 o'clock Monday morning. He said, if you were late, your life was a living hell. Reminded me of my typing teacher, Brother John Michael. Don't look at the keys, you boob. The second time, don't look at the keys, you jackass. And he'd pick you up by your ears and type with your nose. I learned how to type that way. But, hey, unbelievable show, guys. Yancey Porter, Rebel Yell Hotline, Dave Tompkins, Doug Dean, Buddy Martin. Thanks, Eddie and Sam, for the Eddie Murphy Track and Field Classic. To all of our sponsors and everything. We got a big one. We're coming out to Dallas. We're going to have y'all on with us next week. It's going to be a lot of fun. When we could go on and on and on. This is so much fun. But I think the takeaway from today is we don't know, and we'll be back Monday to talk about it. But everybody have a great weekend. We're the greatest country in the world. We're all blessed. And go do some great things today. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
What was that? Kind of creepy.
The Buddy Martin Show. All right.
Trying to give you your ads here if I can.
Yeah, let me say this real quick. I want to support all of our sponsors. Great folks like the folks out at Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company. on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee. Open Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Remember, they've got over 7,000 pairs of men's and women's boots, and live at the Boot Room music Saturday, July 20th. You need to call out to Hewlett and Dunn and get your tickets. The Park Hillbillies will be playing. Again, all of our sponsors, like the Vitamin
By the
Shop
way,
in
Rob,
Oxford.
here's
Yeah.
one for you right here.
So important to shop local and to buy American. For 60 years, Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company has been on the historic Collierville Square, and we strive to sell made in the USA products when available. With over 7,000 pairs of Western boots and work boots in stock for men and women, come and see our huge selection of clothing, jeans, and accessories from top brands made in the USA. Please support local business and come shop with us at Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company. God bless the USA.
Well, there you go. That's the way we got something in there at least.
Yeah, now look, it worked out. Go ahead and cut us off now. We're still on.
Right. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, okay.